Hello, dear friends. May God bless. May the Holy Spirit lead our meditation on His Word so that then we will know, decide what to choose for our lives. God is magnificent. God is glorious. When we think and meditate on the story of Abraham, we learn with him, we learn with God how he chooses people and why he chose, for example, Abraham, right? Because at first, Abraham was an idolater. Did you know that? That's it. Abraham's parents were idolaters. Obviously, Abraham followed in that same line of thought. He would appeal to his pagan gods. So it's interesting and important to know this so that people may analyze themselves, because God doesn't choose people who are super righteous, who looks good, who is perfectly well behaved. No, he doesn't choose that way. God's criteria in choosing people, the criteria, I believe, at least that's Abraham's case, because being an idolater, so how could God choose an unbeliever, an idolater who worshipped idols? He wouldn't, right? But Abraham showed, he presented to God something in his character that pleased him. You know, this is very nice because I think that this is the recipe of those who are chosen by God. God sees our heart, or rather, He sees, He considers and evaluates the intentions of our heart. He sees towards what or where our intentions are inclined. He sees that. He knows all things. All things. There is nothing that he doesn't know concerning you or myself or any of us. Because he's great. He's very great. And when he called Abraham, when he chose Abraham and gave him a task, a mission, he knew that Abraham was going to obey because God himself had given him courage to do so. So it's interesting to observe that the Bible says that the Lord said to Abram, this is nice. This is very great, very glorious. If you just read it like that, what will you notice here? Now the Lord said to Abram, what did he say? The person will just want to know what God said to Abram. But if the person meditates on these words, if they reason and think and evaluate, then they will think, wow, the Lord said to Abram, meaning it was the Lord who addressed those words to Abraham. It wasn't Abraham who addressed himself to God in prayer. And this makes a very big difference. Because if the Lord spoke to Abram, is because the Lord chose him. Then you may ask, And how do we know that God has chosen us, Bishop? You will know because God leaves no room for doubts. When He speaks, He leaves no room for doubts whatsoever. Zero doubt. The person knows that it's God speaking to them. So, for example, when you read the Bible, you read and you read, but all of a sudden, you read a specific word, one word, and that word opened your understanding. That little word that is there, lost amongst so many others, that word opened your mind, your understanding, and you are like, wow, it is God speaking to you. That's how God speaks. He doesn't speak when the person is thinking of other things. Imagine you reading the Bible and you read it anxiously and just want to finish it because you are fulfilling your religious duty. Then God won't speak to you like that. If you are anxious, if you are worried about anything else that is not to hear and understand the voice of God, then He won't speak to you. In the case of Abraham, Bishop, well, the case of Abraham, God first saw in Abraham a man of character. He wasn't perfect because he was an idolater, as his parents were. They were idolaters, so he wasn't perfect. They worshipped idols of wood, stone, metal, and back in the day, idols would make a lot of money to their maker, right? It was a highly profitable business, as it is up until today. It's a highly profitable business. So there are people who do not pay attention to these. They just think, oh, I don't deserve. How can God speak to me? Who am I? I'm a sinner. I was rejected by everything and everyone, by the world. I mean, how could God look at me? I'm full of mistakes and sins. Very well. God saw Abraham, and Abraham was full of sins. However, however, he had a good character. He was a man of an excellent character, a blameless character that pleased God. And this pleases God because a good character, the person who has a good character, is righteous. They like things in place. They might be an idolater or have done this and that and the other. But if they have a character that is good and blameless, for sure, they will please God because God is righteousness. God is righteous. So when He sees on earth billions of human beings, each one like ants, like ants. That bunch of ants that you go there with your feet and you touch it, and all of a sudden more comes out from the ground, running right, left, and center. I think that's how human beings are in the eyes of God. So God finds amongst billions of people the ones He looks for. The Bible actually says that the eyes of the Lord are on the earth, throughout all the earth, looking for those whose heart are loyal towards Him, whose heart is good, is perfect towards him. Towards him. It may not be perfect towards others, but towards God. Because God is righteousness. God is light. He looks for people, let's put it this way, who love the light, who want the light. They may perhaps be doing what's wrong, but they don't want to do those things. They don't want to live that way anymore. So God looks for people like these who are blameless. And he sees, obviously, those who are and those who aren't. Abraham was one of these men. His father wasn't. His brother wasn't either. Abraham had a brother, and his brother was not like him, like Abraham. He was different from his brother, from his father, from his family. And this is what makes the difference, dear friends. Because in the world we live in today, the logic, the philosophy is the following: every man for himself, which means the person is selfish. They think first of themselves. Abraham was not like that. Abraham had a character that pleased God, so much so that he lived back then in a time when men, any man, who had a wife who was barren, that man had the right, it was legal, it was what the law said. It wasn't about being an humanizer, but he had the right to take another woman to give him children. Abraham didn't accept, he didn't give in to that idea. He didn't want Sarah to suffer because she was barren. He kept faithful, he remained faithfulness to her. He was loyal to his faithfulness and love towards her. And he was a rich man. You can imagine a rich man, a man who was famous, right? He was well regarded by society because he was a stable man, financially speaking. He was the boss, he was the master of his lands in his father's house. But he valued his love towards Sarah, although she was barren. Although she was barren. Because a person in a situation like his, for example, I think to myself, it's a humiliation not to have children. It was shameful. It was shameful. He was considered as a fruitless fig tree. It was a curse. He had to have children. You see that Jacob, he got involved with 4 women so that he could have children and multiply his descendants and to keep his name in society, because his wealth was growing. Abraham already had great wealth. So he felt humiliated, embarrassed. That's how his circumstances were. Okay, who is going to carry out my name? Because that was something very important those days. The tradition of preserving your name for your children and your children's children and etc. That's why you see in the Bible the genealogy of the heroes of faith, as well as of those who failed, because it was important to speak about that. That was very important. It actually is very important up until today in Israel, the person's name. So, Abraham was this man humiliated by the circumstances. Sarah couldn't be blamed either, it wasn't her fault. So, God saw in Abraham a perfect man because of his character. Because although he had the right to have other women and have children with other women, and Abraham actually had more children with another woman after Sarah died. Besides Hagar, he had other children as well. We see that there are researches that show that more than 83% of mankind carries Abraham's DNA. They are descendants of Abraham. That's what I've been told. And I believe this. Regardless of the researches, I believe this because God spoke about the multitudes that would come from him. I will make you a great nation. Kings will come forth from you. Nations. However, obviously, everything that happened to Abraham depended on his calling. And the Lord said to Abram, meaning just the fact that the Lord addressed himself to Abram, that was already enough. That was already the blessing of all blessings. I can speak about this to you. Not that I am like Abraham. No, who am I? That's not how I see myself. But I know the day that God spoke to me, and every person knows. Everyone knows of themselves. You who are watching me now and you've had an experience with God, you know what God spoke to you, don't you? Tell me the truth. And the day that He addressed Himself to you, He also gave you the courage, the faith for you to obey. And you obeyed. And from there, a new person was born in you, right? That's what happened to me as well. God chooses us, as it happened with Abraham. And this calling of God precedes faith. First, He calls, and only then He gives us faith to have the courage to obey Him. It is God, we cannot forget, who works in us both to will, to obey, as well as to do the task in the sacrifice of obeying Him. We said yesterday that a person of God, in order to gain, they first have to lose. And that's what happened to Abraham. In order for him to be the blessing itself, in order for him to become the blessing itself, we are going to see this later on, he became the blessing itself. God was with him. Whoever was with him, God would be with them. Whoever was against Abraham, they were going against God as well. And this is very strong. It's not a matter of being lucky or unlucky or destiny. No, this is nonsense talk. This is from the devil. All this nonsense and these philosophies out there. No. When God speaks to someone, you can be sure that great things will happen with this person. I speak for myself. I speak for myself. I can talk to you about this. I have authority to talk about this. And who can deny it? If it wasn't for the God of Abraham, there was no way that Bishop Macedo would exist, or that the universal church would exist. He's the one who does. He's the one who works in us to will as well as to do. However, let's go back to the question. How is it that God chooses a person? Why does he choose a person? As I said in the beginning, he sees the righteous character of that person. He doesn't see perfection, because if he looks for perfection in us, he won't find anyone. But a perfect heart before him, it's a heart that sometimes is not perfect even towards our loved ones, let alone towards God. But God sees the deepest part of the soul of each of us. So if the person pretends, if the person is a hypocrite, if the person says one thing but they think another, if the person carries within themselves some sort of selfishness and self-centeredness, if the person is that kind of person that within themselves they usually say, every man for himself, this person for sure is excluded from God's call. That's why you see, it's what Jesus said, many are called, few are chosen. That's written. Jesus is the one who said it. God himself said it. Many are called, few are chosen. So God chooses those whom he will bring forth as his children. It's not like us. We don't choose to come into this world and be born, do we? My children weren't chosen to be born. Our children aren't chosen to be born. No, you don't know who will come. But God does know. God knows, because he won't choose just anyone. He will choose those who will honor his name. Those who will honor him above all things, making him first in their life. Those whose character is divine, like the character of the heroes of faith, who had their mistakes and their flaws. David was a man after God's own heart. How did God choose David, knowing that he was going to commit such a serious mistake? Up until today, Israel pays for the mistake of David. Look at that. But why did he choose David? Because David had a heart after God's own heart. His heart was inclined towards righteousness. Righteousness. And God is righteousness. This is very important in order for you not to. And righteousness is a matter of decision. We were born with the conscience of what is right and what's wrong, of what is fair and what is unfair. And if we decide for what is unfair, then obviously that we won't be approved by God. But if we decide for what is fair, because I remember that my father, he was a man who suffered a lot, a whole lot. He wasn't a perfect man at all. However, my father was a man who loved truth. He hated lies. I never forget his teachings. He used to say, I would forgive a thief, but I do not forgive a liar. Obviously, we have to forgive everyone, but my father lived by this philosophy. He hated lies. So if he hated lies, it's because he was a righteous man. He was inclined towards righteousness, although he wasn't perfect. You can have many mistakes and flaws, but if you are inclined towards righteousness, towards what's correct and fair, you can be sure God has chosen you and He will speak to you. If He hasn't spoken to you yet, tomorrow we shall be speaking more about this topic. May God bless you all, and until then, praise be to God.